Hello everyone, Nikki Batgirl D'Angelo here for a short one today. It's another Let's Play KSP. This is episode 2. And today we have Jebediah. He is our astronaut, or our Kerbonaut, that is about ready to go off on a great adventure into the great darkness of space. He was showed up by Valentina on the last episode, who was just supposed to do a suborbital flight, and his was supposed to be the first. And with Valentina kicking that ship over into an orbital flight, Jeb he's been set aside to doing some testing. So he's testing hammers, and he's testing fleas, and he's testing LTV swivel engines. And what he's trying to do is get all these taken care of in one run. We've already gotten a couple things taken care of. We'll move on to the next. Now, after we get up to a certain height, we're going to have to dump this lower stage and kick off the fleet. And Jeb is looking at it like, I can't believe they want me to do this. I have to keep this spaceship below, 320 knots? At what altitude? And he's starting to think, wow, maybe I should just do what Val did and just screw what they say and do what I want to say. And then he realizes she was scrubbed from the first moon launch because of this. So he's thinking, maybe I should just listen to them. So he starts to back off on the throttle, kicks it over a little bit, and decides to ride it out and just do the tests that they ask him of. Not realizing how important these tests are going to be to future missions. And of course, right now, there we go. He tests the flea. And the flea gets him moving and pushes him into a speed higher. And he gets to take the ship up into orbit. Now, Jeb is a nice guy. He's not the competitive type because he's driven like Valentina is. He just happens to be really kind, really cool, and really good. So he's not thinking about the competition with Valentina at this point. He could have done a lot of different things. He could have pushed this into a high orbit. He could have pushed this into a lower orbit and tried to go for speed records. There's much that he could have done. He could have used all the delta V that was left in this to swung around the moon. I mean, it was possible, right? But instead, he just decides to be the one that's going to follow the rulebook and fly this mission. So he takes his time looking out at the stars, counting down how long he has to burn for. Without high-priced computers, it's very difficult for him to actually burn for the amount of time that they want him to. He has to remember that if he's going to go into orbit, he's got to leave ever so slight amount of fuel to deorbit. And that's something he started to forget about as he was looking out at the stars and just gaping at the expanse of it all, at the beauty of it all. As his fuel starts to whittle down, we start to find that Jeb is getting himself into a sticky wicket. And that sticky wicket might be not being able to come home, because he has fewer than 100 meters a second left of delta V if he was to put himself into orbit, which isn't that bad. So let's see what we can do. So Jeb gets himself back in the cabin after doing some EVAs and decides what he's going to do is get himself situated to get into orbit, so at least he could get the experience that Val has had. Now, Val's was definitely a much more tense moment, for her ship wasn't meant to go into orbit at all, and she lacked the one thing that is very important to survival here, which is the heat shield. But even more so, which, by the way, Jeb doesn't lack the heat shield, she lacked the ability to separate the capsule from the rest of the ship. But Jeb has that. So he puts it into orbit, 117 and 91. That's not bad. It's not circular, but it's good. And decides to ride it around just a little bit. But at this point, he's trying to think, all right, he's in orbit. What's the one thing that he could do to really show up Valentina? So Valentina pushed it from a reckless point of view. Even though she flew around Kerbin when she wasn't supposed to, even though she was the first Kerbin and she was a woman that did it, she did it recklessly. She did it and almost not only killed herself, but killed funding for the program. So Jeb decides he's supposed to fly. But he's supposed to come down anywhere, just to be able to come down. And he decides, you know what? Let me show them how good Kerbonauts are. Let me show them why they should put their money in our program. And let me show them how precise we can be. So Jeb decides to take control. And he hits a button that separates the data stream that's coming from mission control. Now, if you think about Luke Skywalker turning off the targeting computer on the trench run, that's essentially what he's done here. He's trying to hit that little tiny exhaust vent with a proton torpedo. And he says, you know what? With everything I have now, with the rudimentary control systems and everything, I'm going to land at KSP. Or as close as I can get. Now, without retro rockets or any real good shoots, he knows he can't land on the ground. But where he needs to land is about as close to KSP as he can get and still be in the water. So he decides, after doing 20 minutes of calculations in that first orbit, which he only made one orbit, he knew exactly where he had to do his burn. And he saved just enough fuel in case he was wrong to either push forward or pull back. So he's still doing computations. He's looking at his delta V. He's looking at how fast the atmosphere is actually interacting with his craft. And he's decided, you know what? I'm probably going to come pretty close to where I was supposed to be. But I'm going to keep this rocket nonetheless, just in case. Now he has the opportunity to separate. Now he's going to have to before he gets below 30K. Because once he gets below 30K, the atmosphere, he knows the atmosphere is going to be very thick, and he's going to have to eject the rest of the rocket so he could just land safely. If he stays attached, the rocket's going to tumble, and the heat is going to kill him. So he keeps it on just a little bit longer, hoping to God that he has just enough delta V left, just in case he have to make a very small change in velocity. But his computations start to look right, and he decides, you know what? Get rid of it. I'm coming down, and I'm coming down as close to KSP as I can. So Valentina showed that they could orbit very early in the program. And what Jeb is about ready to show is it wasn't a mistake, it wasn't an accident, it wasn't luck, it wasn't divine intervention. It was actually the skill of the Kerbonauts. That is pretty awesome, right? Because Jeb and Valentina are very skilled. They're arrogant and they're driven, but they're also very skilled. So Jeb has figured out that he could land just a few thousand meters at most away from KSP. As he's streaking over KSP at almost 1,000 kilometers or 1,000 meters a second, he realizes he did it. And his ship slows down as he passes over the runway, coming down, slowing down, and starting to arc ever so gracefully towards the sea just off the coastline of KSP. As we accelerate time to see him land, we find him land just a few hundred meters off of the shoreline. So where Val has shown that they had the ability to circle the globe, Jebediah has showed them that they could do it with precision. What an amazing 2 missions. Both of them at the seat of your pants. Both of them with something that you didn't expect. And Jeb is tasked with doing something that she wasn't. Getting wet. Well, she shouldn't be getting wet on a flight anyway, right? Anyway, Jeb gets back in the ship. Makes sure he takes his crew report and his EVA report and goes back to KSP. And while he hasn't gotten the 100 plus that she's gotten, he's gotten enough science to be able to get a couple of more upgrades to the space stations and space ships that they could build. Well, space stations will come much later. And he's gotten himself that first point of experience, so he too can turn on autopilot in the ship. There's no debris left behind. We had put 2 parachutes on the hammers and they did not work. Coming out of that narrative, I'd probably have to find a some kind of a mod that would allow that to go off. I don't know what that is. I'll have to look it up. But let's look at some of the things that we could actually add here. We have quite a number of different missions that we could take on, and I'm sure we will take on some here. But as we move forward, we're making money, and we're getting experience. And at some point in the future, we're going to push it just ever so slightly forward, so we're going to have to go circle the moon. And I'll hope you'll be here for me. So we're taking the better rockets. We'll be able to launch bigger rockets, so better engines, bigger rockets. And I hope that you'll come back to the channel. So please leave your comments below in the comment section. And if you have any questions, please leave them there. Any suggestions, please leave them there. And with that said, you all be safe out there, and I'll talk to you soon.